Ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday, January 9th, 2014, and this is Day 9 Daily. Number 666. Where we learn to be a better gamer. In today's episode, we're going to take a look from the fiery pits of hell at some amazing meching play brought to you by Axiom's Ryung. As meching in Terran vs. Terran is probably the most legitly accepted venue for the mechings to be seen, and yet it is still very, very hard. We'll take a look at what's going on with the opening, because it looks weird, it's marine heavy, and we'll explain why. We're going to take a look at a huge swell of Hellions seemingly randomly, but what? That doesn't make sense! And third, we're going to talk about the mid and late game with huge hair. I'm getting a haircut on Saturday, so I'm kind of turning into a small child where I want to see how much amazing stuff I can do with my hair before it gets chippity chopped. If you are not already, you should definitely be watching Awesome Games Done Quick. That's live right now with the StarCraft 2 speedrun by Railcoon. He's beating the Heart of the Swarm brutal campaign under 4 hours. Yes. And yeah, if you want to find that, go to twitch.tv, and it's just right there on the homepage. If you're looking at the archives, go to Awesome Games Done Quick on Google. Good. Is there anything else to announce? Oh yeah, Fun Day Monday for next week. Submit to me a 2v2 where you both play Terran and lift off at the start of the game, landing somewhere else. And then you begin the game. Submit that to Monday at day9.tv. Good. I think that's it. Tomorrow I'm going to go play PlanetSide 2, which I know almost nothing about other than many of my SC buddies have recommended it, and they sponsored Axiom. Let's go into the game. What do you know? It's Yonsu. And also, you know what I know? I don't think this daily is going to be terribly long. We're probably going to do 3 20-minuters, 3 15-minuters, something like that. Something along those lines. Let's do the opening in part 1. First, we have to talk about the map Yonsu, which is one of the more weirdly structured maps out there. Largely because it goes like high ground here, and then there's like a low ground valley, and then there's another round of high ground, and then a low ground valley and high ground. Excuse me. And there's really no clear center of action. So, I mean, taking a look at this locale, which is the sort of forwardmost base of the Terran, yeah, I mean, if he moves here along this right vein, there's still nothing preventing the enemy from moving up along the left side. Also, these fringe expansions tend to be really awkward to defend. I mean, everything about it is sort of a positional pain in the butt. The one thing that most people tend to do is start here, move to their natural expansion, and generally we see this one as a third base. But we can even see that this is kind of a hairy position to defend because of the fact that there's an entrance to the side. Out here is another big, broad entrance. We also have our main entrance to our natural, and often forgot we have a back door that's very vulnerable because of the fact that you can literally walk tanks, siege here, and shoot almost anything that's trying to walk in. I mean, actually, it's probably most visible if I do this. If you siege tanks here, all this is going to die, and then you can easily just drop, say, 1 tank here and Marines there, and then this is just guaranteed to die. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting positional considerations that we'll be going through on this map. God, I keep forgetting that I have hell as my background, and I come back and I'm like, the encoder is gonna... Oh. I did that. Okay. So I'm going to do something rather weird. Most of the time, the interesting considerations for the map relate to the mid-game. Most of the mid-game is you having a couple of units that need to do big things, and the big things differ. As one example, sieging tanks right here can hit a poor expansion that's right there. So we might say, how do I get to here very quickly? Most of these considerations I'm going to leave for part 2. In part 1, I want to talk about DOS opening and DOS sound settings, which seem to be aptly enabled. So let's suppose right now we know that we're going to mech. Again, part 2 is going to talk about why we're meching, but here we just want to note that we're meching and what our opening is going to be. So, one of the weirder things that we're going to see Ryung do is pile up a lot of Marines right away. Which seem kind of like an unusual choice, because if we say we're meching, shouldn't we just be going mech? Well, the fact of the matter is, we are very, very gas-starved early on. Meching is difficult because you need the gas for factories. Most of the meching units take gas, like the siege tank. We're going to need siege tanks always for early defense if we're meching, because it's really just the best anti-ground defense when you're mech. But then we have to say things like, what about if he goes Banshee or other assorted starport plays? It's hard to defend any starport play early game with just mech. So that's why we tend to see a lot of Marines pop up early, because it's that little versatile element that we need that doesn't take any gas. We still get to save our gas. So I like right out the gate what we're seeing Ryung do, which is to go for a refinery first, and then for his barracks. For any of you who don't know, this is just a nice timing where if you go refinery first at, like, 11, 12, and then a barracks when you can afford it, well, you get a factory right out the gate. So there's a couple openings that we need to worry about, technically. Let's start with the cheesy bullshit, shall we? Very easy to scout the most immediately threatening cheesy BSs, because this is closed off. So here's really one potential cheese area. The second potential cheese area is somewhere nearby here. And the other one's down here. So we can clearly see an SCV scout that just goes yoink, yoink, and down here. Spots almost everything. This is not really that common of a map for cheese because it's just kind of bad. Plus, Ryung's up against MMA. MMA is just, he just doesn't really do that in this matchup. But still, we want to consider it, because when you hop on the ladder, chances are you're not going to be up against MMA. You're going to be up against someone who's a douche. Probably someone who goes for 2 racks in TVT and Murloc Warlock in Hearthstone. I said it. I said it. No, I don't go Murloc Warlock. I just go Ultra Aggro Burn Mage. Well, you're still a fucking monster! Anyway, let's go back to the game. Let's go back to the game. Let's go back to the game. We're going to return back to the game. We're just going to swing on back to the game. Alright, great. Factory right away. Isn't that just a lovely little timing? Isn't it absolutely lovely? The second round of things we got to begin getting concerned about would be the Speed Riapa, which is actually just a regular Reaper, because this isn't the old school StarCraft 2 where Reapers had speed upgrades and all that stuff. So here's a moment where it's very easy to note, wow, I have enough money to get a reactor. Because if this Marine isn't started, I'll have 75 minerals and 64 gas. So, I'm just going to reactor. That's ultra dangerous. Because a Reaper can show up and just do a lot of damage. And Reapers are incredibly common on this map because of the back door, where he can just... So I love this. I absolutely love it. Again, most of the time, the average bear, in my research of being a StarCraft 2 educator, the average bear likes to think of what he is doing to the enemy. What is it that I am going to do to you? Ooh, I want to go really fast Hellion to kill you off. But you'll see every pro, most of his actions are to prevent what you can do to him, such as 2 Marines to deal with any Reaper. Okay. So when our second Marine is getting close to done, refinery. Or as, you know, you might say more simply, when he can afford it, he's getting a refinery. Marines still being produced. Why is that? Well, there's less common builds like 2 Barracks Reaper into big aggression that's kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. And this is why we're seeing that most players who do go mech like to be going for something along the lines of a fast Banshee, along the lines of anything that lets this barracks pump the Mariners out. Just a little safety maneuver. So we see Ryung actually didn't scout too incredibly quickly. Just kind of on the eventual side of things. Why is that? Because he just hasn't quite seen a Reaper, hasn't quite seen any of the usual stuffs. And so he's going to be popping on into the enemy. Now, in this game, MMA is doing the same thing as Ryung, which is why I haven't spent any time on MMA. So I like this little move by Ryung, because he's checking to see, how far along is this? He sees 3 Marines. Alright, cool. We immediately can conclude some pretty reasonable things. Generally speaking, it's probably not an early expand. Generally speaking, the early expand would be on the low ground. And generally speaking, an early expander would have more Marines at this point. Generally like 4 or even 5. And here we saw 3. Oh, by the way, I'm pausing at the 5-minute mark. That's probably pretty important to note. Probably going to see 5 Marines here. And it's kind of easy for Ryung to deduce that because he did non-stop Marine production and he has 4 out, so derp. Pretty much guaranteed to be something along the lines of a 1-1-1 opening. 1-1-1 being 1 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, and there are a lot of varied openings in this circumstance. Doesn't have to be a fast Banshee. And Ryung does one that I think is one of the least common and one of the most kick-ass. It's just a Raven Rush. This is one of the weirder things because it's not all about doing something huge to you early on. This looks super defensive. But notice all the wonderful benefits we gain. We're going to have detection against a cloaked Banshee. We are going to, well, that's the big one. We have all of our tech out. We have a 1-1-1. We're not going to be constrained in any way. If for some reason we do need any unit, we can begin to get any unit. And here we see Ryung start to straighten himself out a little bit. This is one of the funkier switches where literally everything's going to abandon its, abandon its original position. And we see our wonderful all-purpose Marines sent back home, sent to where we can defend against Banshees. If for some reason a bunch of Hellions suddenly begin to flood up towards us, well, we will have a Raven out, which will permit us to do a little bit of extra work with that, gosh, what's it called? Auto turret. I could only think to say shooter dude. And now we have just an absolutely fantastic formation of buildings. We can go for double Marine, we can begin tank, we can get a Viking, should we so need it. And in this position, Ryung still doesn't really know what's happening, but he does have a very important piece of information. He sees nothing. He sees absolutely nothing. So if you don't see anything, you can probably conclude that he's doing something either techie or expandy, and yeah, that's about it. He's probably not coming in with some huge death force. So again, we are favoring the Marines for versatility. Trying to get those up. And just in case of any huge attack coming in ground-wise, oh, tank, and then the Viking. I mean, Ryung is getting an extremely well-rounded defense. But most importantly, this Raven that was built early, we're going to use that Seeker missile a lot once we hit mid-game. So at Ryung, we may as well have seen one of the safest, most well-rounded openings that you can even do as Terran. It's getting an expansion reasonably fast. He's starting tank production reasonably quickly. We're starting to see Vikings come out, and Ryung's not going to beat around the bush. He saw a Banshee, so he's going to get 2 Vikings. He's going to spread them out. He doesn't need to spend any money on scans. Or excuse me, he doesn't need to spend any energy on scans. He can go all out, balls out, with as much muling as he so desired. Look at all the repulsion techniques. Ryung is an electron who likes to hang out with other electrons. Get what I'm saying? Why do you keep pushing me away? Because I like to win, baby. Everything from here is pretty intuitive on the defensive side of things. But here we have some oddity. I have informed you that we are seeing mech. Am I some kind of liar? Am I a douche? No, goodness, not even on daily 666, where we are in the deepest pits of Mephisto's colon. Mephisto? I think I just said manifesto and left out an and got Mephisto. The important thing is that I got to say the word colon, but look at me. Look at me. I told you that we're going mech. I told you that. Why is it that we're going Vedivac? Just gives a little bit of extra value to the Marines that we've invested so heavily in. Medevacs work great with our ability to retreat with Panke and other such things. Medevacs are pretty undervalued early on with these meching compositions. So we're going to keep playing until we hit something 10-minute mark-ish. Ryung does another thing that I am a tremendous fan of. Ryung gets a 3rd command center up very fast, because as much as gas is the predominantly spoken about resource, gas for tanks, gas for factories, minerals are also a tremendous sink. It's just a resource heavy thing. Primarily gas heavy, but it really is just resource heavy across the board. So Ryung just has a very simple formation. Viking spread out. Look at this Viking over here. Great. And everything else left in between. So we've looked at a really nice, really efficient opening where we have this reactor here. What has our starport done? It's been active almost the entire time. It went Raven, Viking, Viking, Medevac. And what I love about this build is how active Ryung keeps all his buildings. And here is one of the oddest moves from a starport to describe it as active. It's just going to immediately build a reactor. Now there was a flub, there should be a second factory building. I think this SCV just got truant. So in a moment we're going to see the second factory, we're going to see a second factory. It's just a little late, those should be going down at the same time. Where's the second factory? Come on, Ryung. Oh my goodness. Oh, how embarrassing. Yes. Alright, fine. We'll see the second factory in a little bit. It's just a little bit of a flub here. This really should have the second factory. See, there it is. I wanted to zoom forward to here, just to note that this is a little bit of an accident to have this late. It's just a little bit of a slip-up. But I will still return to the moment of decision here. The moment of decision. How would we... Oh, this isn't the moment of decision. Oh, I was looking at the wrong production tab. Okay, let me regather my thoughts and conclude part 1 with this. How would we describe Ryung's opening? Well, we would describe it as, honestly, pretty slow, pretty defensive, pretty nice and relaxed. I mean, look at this. 3rd command center here. Let's just state some very simple qualities. The tank count has already begun to get high. We've begun tank production very early. We also have had this barracks here or we've had the starport very early. We don't want to be just burning out tons of cash on air units with no real purpose. And there's a couple moves here that I just love from Ryung. What he's going to do... See, there was the accident where it should have been 2 built. He even had the money to do it. Ryung is going to be going for a huge swell of Hellions. a big swell of Hellions. He's actually going to be getting 2 reactors on the factories instead of getting the more typical 2 factories with Tech Lab, 1 with reactor. That's one thing I want you to think about during the break. The other one is I want you to think about the consequence of using this medevac, using these Marines here. And then the last one is to talk about when these geysers should be taken. I want you to stew on that jazz. I want you to process that shit. And then when I return, we will be in the fiery depths of hell, somewhere deep in the recesses of some satanic colon. And we will then ask ourselves, why mech on Yonsu? And what attacks should we have planned as Ryung? Stay tuned.